I, Serafina Shen, should have been the pampered heiress, the true successor of the distinguished Sterling family. But I was switched at birth. When they finally brought me back to the Upper East Side mansion, and I saw the girl who had lived my life for the past 20 years, Chloe Sterling, collapsing in tears in our parents' arms, all I felt was a cold, bitter amusement. How strange. She's the one who enjoyed this life for 2 whole decades, yet now the fake heiress seems more pitiful than me, the one whose life was stolen. Chloe Sterling was born with a congenital heart defect. Even the slightest emotional shock could make her faint. My biological parents, the family doctor, the housekeeper, and even the boy next door turned childhood friend, Ethan Davies, all panicked and rushed upstairs to the 2nd floor. Meanwhile, in the luxurious mansion, I sat quietly in the living room downstairs beneath the glittering crystal chandelier, looking every bit the forgotten outsider. But I didn't mind. On the way here, I stopped by a convenience store and bought myself a bag of cherry gummies. With nothing else to do, I unwrapped one, letting the sweetness melt on my tongue. It made me smile, peaceful, distant. That was when Ethan Davies, Chloe's beloved childhood friend, came down the stairs. His gaze swept over me, then stopped. Before the smile could fully fade from my lips, his cold voice cut through the silence. "Chloe is upstairs like that, and you're here smiling, Sarah?" I looked up, letting my eyes travel lazily from his shoes to his face. My tone was flat. "And? What does that have to do with me?" He froze, clearly not expecting me to talk back. His usually composed expression darkened. "How does it not? If it weren't for you, would Chloe be in this condition?" I let out a soft laugh, sharp as a blade. "Oh, her heart condition is my fault too? Or are you blaming me for being born into the right family and taking back my rightful place as the true Sterling heiress?" Ethan's face went stiff. He clearly knew the truth, otherwise he wouldn't have come running just to defend Chloe. He just conveniently forgot one thing. In this switched-at-birth story, I was the one left behind. While I grew up in a shabby group home, eating donated meals and taking odd jobs to survive, she walked through sunlit Central Park in designer dresses, holding our parents' hands. The family portrait hanging in the living room now felt like a cruel joke. Ethan still couldn't let it go. "This isn't Chloe's fault. How can you treat her like that?" I tilted my head slightly, smiling faintly. Did I ever say it was her fault? Did I blame anyone? You were there. Did I say a single harsh word to her? She stood outside the door on her own, the wind blowing at her until she turned pale. The moment she saw me, she burst into tears. "Tell me, did you hear me bully her even once?" He stared at me, frustration and anger mixing in his eyes. "Regardless, it's because of you. If it weren't for you, Chloe wouldn't be in this condition." I laughed again, the sound soft but dripping with mockery. "Fine. If you can't win the argument, everything becomes my fault. Great. So, can I leave now?" Honestly, I had no reason to stay in this place. I stood up, the gummy candy now flavorless on my tongue, and picked up my old, worn backpack. In this gold-plated mansion, it looked like a smudge on a silk sheet, out of place and unwanted. I had just slung it over my shoulder when a soft voice called out behind me. "Wait." I turned. The woman who was supposedly my biological mother, Mrs. Sterling, stood on the staircase, her eyes complicated, her voice shaky. "Sarah, we already brought you home. Where else would you go? This is your home." I bit lightly on the gummy, letting the sweetness burst, cold as ice, down to my heart. "Funny, I thought I was here for charity handouts, considering how I've been treated." I deliberately glanced at Ethan. Mrs. Sterling's face drained of color. Ethan's too. Why would you say that? Mrs. Sterling whispered. Did I say something untrue? I raised my eyebrow. Everyone in this house wants me gone. Even the housekeeper muttered something nasty while running upstairs. I mimicked the gesture of holding a bowl. It's a shame I didn't bring an actual begging bowl. If I had, she might have tossed a few coins in just to humiliate me. Mrs. Sterling's lips trembled, as if she wanted to speak but couldn't form the words. The sight was oddly satisfying. I'd always been good at saying things that left people speechless, unable to defend themselves. Compared to being locked in a dark room for 3 days without food or water, or being beaten bloody at the group home, these sharp words of mine were nothing. After several minutes of heavy silence, Mrs. Sterling finally spoke. Her voice was hoarse from crying, tinged with exhaustion. All right. We all know what happened to Chloe isn't your fault. She paused, forcing herself to steady her breath. Your room is ready, right next to Chloe's. As for transferring schools, I'll arrange for you to attend the best private academy in Manhattan. Let's end things here for today. I let out a soft laugh, the corner of my lips lifting. End things? Just like that? So one gentle sentence is enough to erase everything, is it? Right then, the fake heiress descended the stairs, supported by the housekeeper. Her face was still pale, lips trembling. The moment her eyes found mine, she forced a fragile smile. Sister, please stay and live with me. I don't mind. Oh, you don't mind? I bit down on the gummy candy, the sweetness turning bitter on my tongue. And what qualifications do you have to mind anything? Chloe Sterling froze, hers widening before tears spilled over her cheeks. I watched her calmly, almost enjoying the sight. I didn't come back here to be part of this family. I came back to watch the show, and if possible, tear apart the flawless facade they've all been pretending behind. She started crying again, voice shaking uncontrollably. I'm sorry. I know I took everything from you. I'm sorry. Her sobs grew harsher, her hand pressing to her chest as her breathing hitched, like she was about to faint. Mrs. Sterling rushed forward in a panic, calling for the medicine, then turned to glare at me. Any trace of guilt now gone. I tilted my head slightly, my voice light as passing air. She's supposed to have a congenital heart condition, but why does this look more like an asthma attack? Does the house have an inhaler handy? The room froze, instantly. Ethan Davies stepped forward, eyes blazing red with fury. He finally snapped, shoving me. Enough! How cruel can you be? Chloe is suffering like this, and you still curse her? I stepped back half a pace. Quick, instinctive. After all, dodging blows was something I'd mastered long ago, escaping the beatings at the old group home. So the one who fell wasn't me. It was Ethan Davies. He stumbled forward face first onto the hard wooden floor. A pathetic sight. Chloe stopped crying immediately and ran to him, panic replacing her tears. Ethan, you okay? I didn't bother looking. Instead, I turned toward Mrs. Sterling. She still stood at the base of the stairs, her expression heavy and conflicted. I looked straight at her, forcing the most artificial smile I could muster. So, do you still want me to stay here? Her face twitched, eyes wavering before hardening. She spoke each word as if forcing them through her teeth. No matter what, you are still my daughter. I fell silent, though inside I was laughing. Of course she would say that. We share the same face, uncannily so, especially when we smile. Compared to Chloe's merely pleasant and delicate features, she didn't resemble Mrs. Sterling at all. When Mrs. Sterling began arranging a room for me, I spoke up immediately. I want Chloe Sterling's room. The air froze. Chloe stiffened, her already red, tearful eyes widening as her damp lashes trembled. Sister, what did you say? I looked at her, my tone calm and almost sincere. Honestly, have you ever considered applying to Juilliard or NYU Tisch School of the Arts? I think you have the talent for it. Your crying is natural, your emotional immersion is impressive, and your facial expressions are very vivid. You'd fit right into an arts academy. Don't waste your talent. Mrs. Sterling frowned, displeasure flickering in her eyes. There are plenty of rooms in this house. Why must you insist on Chloe's? I met her gaze directly, my voice steady and cold. I lived in a group home for years. Now I just want a decent room. And didn't you say if her birth mother hadn't switched me out back then, that room should have been mine in the first place? At the first half of my sentence, Mrs. Sterling looked ready to object, but the second half silenced her instantly. Chloe hurriedly stepped in, her voice barely above a whisper. Mom, it's fine. If Chloe wants my room, I can give it to her. I don't mind. I let out a soft chuckle, fixing my gaze on her face as I spoke slowly. I don't really like the word give. If something isn't yours to begin with, you shouldn't be offering it so casually. People might misunderstand and think you're a green tea girl. The expressions on both their faces twisted subtly, but I ignored them completely. With my backpack slung over my shoulder, I went straight upstairs and walked into the room. Pastel pink walls, a princess canopy bed with sheer curtains, a walk-in closet filled with shimmering designer dresses, everything in this room said the same thing. For 20 years, the Sterling family had given Chloe every beautiful thing in the world. I stared at my reflection in the mirror. All I saw was a pair of cold, emotionless eyes. Chloe was pitiful, living in the illusion that she was the one chosen. The Sterlings were pitiful, losing a child only to have fate hand them back someone who could never bring them comfort. Everyone here was pitiful in their own way. Everyone except me. I was the troublemaker, the extra piece that didn't fit into this story. No one had been waiting for me. No one welcomed me. I got up and walked barefoot onto the balcony. Moonlight washed over me, so cold it felt like it might seep straight through my skin. I closed my eyes, letting the chill sink in until my mind cleared. I'd heard I had an older brother named Arthur Sterling. Everything had happened while he was away on business in Europe. By the time he returned, I had already moved into the room that once belonged to his fake sister. Anyone looking in from the outside would think it was a classic case of a magpie stealing someone else's nest. I quietly waited to see what kind of strict, overprotective big brother performance he'd give. But what a disappointment. Compared to Chloe, Arthur was so cold it bordered on apathy. From the moment he walked in to the moment he headed upstairs, he said exactly one thing. I'm going to my room. That was it. No questions, no blame, not even the courtesy of caring about anyone in the room. When he disappeared up the staircase, the only sound left in the dining room was the faint clinking of silverware. I was the only one who laughed. A brother that cold, paired with a sister who only knew how to cry, the Sterling family was fascinating in its own twisted way. One had to wonder what kind of upbringing resulted in two children who were polar opposites. Chloe lifted her head slightly. Her swollen eyes still glistened with leftover tears as she looked at me cautiously. Sister, why are you laughing? Do you find my brother interesting? I turned to her, the faintest smile at my lips. Yeah, he's interesting. Then I asked Mrs. Sterling as casually as if I were asking about the weather. Have you found Chloe's biological mother yet? She was arranging flowers in a crystal vase. Her hand froze midair. A rose slipped from her fingers and hit the marble floor with a soft thud. She turned toward me, her expression a mix of shock and displeasure. "Why do you want to find her?" At that moment, there was something unmistakable in her eyes. A flicker of disappointment. "As long as it's within my power, I've done everything you asked for, and you still want to take Chloe away?" Her voice trembled slightly, though she tried to sound composed. "Her health is still—" I cut her off immediately, my tone crisp. "I asked a question. I didn't ask for a speech. And you, someone who handed her own biological daughter to an orphanage to suffer, aren't planning to hold anyone accountable?" The room fell deathly silent. Mrs. Sterling stood frozen, as if she couldn't believe I dared say such a thing. Maybe she had prepared a whole heartfelt monologue, something to soothe, to justify, to pretend she was a mother trying her best. But all of that became meaningless with one sentence. It was like someone dragged her into the light and forced her to see how biased she had been, how neglectful she was toward her real child. Watching her reaction, I could only laugh. A soft laugh, light, but sharper than any blade. "To you, I'm still just a stranger, aren't I?" I walked toward her slowly, meeting her eyes. "Since last night, you've had countless chances to ask me how I've been all these years. Whether I suffered, whether anyone mistreated me." I paused. My voice was calm, almost detached. "You didn't ask." Mrs. Sterling parted her lips as if she wanted to say something, but I didn't give her the chance. "That's enough." I turned and headed up the stairs. My final words fell cold and dry behind me. There's nothing left worth saying between us. That afternoon, Chloe came to find me of her own accord, saying she wanted to apologize. I was sitting on the swing in the backyard, gently rocking back and forth while sunlight filtered through the leaves above, scattering over the wooden planks beneath my feet. Hearing her speak, I casually asked, "Why didn't you fall?" Just that one sentence made her burst into tears. Her voice trembled as she said she wanted to apologize on behalf of the mother she had never met, and that she hoped we could become close sisters. The late afternoon sun was too bright. I squinted and lifted my head to look at her. Only then did I realize that even with tears streaming down her face, her posture remained as proud as ever. Even while apologizing, her back was straight, her chin slightly lifted, her eyes filled with the kind of confidence that comes from being pampered in luxury for 20 years. I looked her straight in the eyes and smiled. "This whole thing isn't your fault anyway. If you really want to apologize, then go find your birth mother and bring her here. I want to hear her say it herself." The smile on Chloe's lips froze. She stepped back, biting her lip, her eyes wavering. I raised an eyebrow, sensing something was off. And sure enough, the very next moment, she suddenly collapsed to the ground, crying out in a pitiful scream. Not far away, standing at the perfect angle to witness everything, was Arthur Sterling. And not just Arthur. Behind him stood a handsome young man whose bright smile formed a stark contrast to Arthur's cold expression. Liam Johnson, Arthur's friend, had stopped by to deliver some documents and had accidentally stumbled upon the scene. I stayed seated on the swing, showing no intention of moving. Chloe turned her head toward Arthur, immediately crying even harder, tears and snot streaming down her face, reaching a hand toward him. "Arthur, my ankle hurts. Can you help me up?" Arthur frowned slightly, but didn't say a word. In the end, he still stepped forward to help her stand, lowering his head to check her injured ankle. Then Chloe stretched out her scraped hand toward him, sounding like a pitiful kitten. My hand is hurt too. Arthur lifted his gaze toward me. Our eyes met. I remained calm. He spoke, but no one knew who the words were meant for. Get inside. Mrs. Sterling ordered the housekeeper to bring the first aid kit. She sat on the sofa, carefully bandaging Chloe's injuries, her expression dark and her lips pressed tightly together. At some point, Liam had quietly walked over to me and whispered, "Who are you? I've never seen you here before." I replied, "I'm the biological daughter of this family." The moment I finished speaking, Mrs. Sterling called out to me, her tone sharp. "Sarah, explain. What happened?" I pretended to look clueless. "Explain what?" "Mom," Chloe tugged gently at her sleeve, her voice timid. "Please don't ask. I'm sure she didn't mean it. I'm fine." "Didn't mean it?" Mrs. Sterling's voice hardened. "Look at your hands and ankles. A daughter of the Sterling family would never do something this manipulative and dirty." I didn't get angry. I simply smiled. Manipulative. Dirty. What exactly do you mean? Perhaps thinking I was just playing dumb to avoid responsibility, Mrs. Sterling lost her patience and spoke bluntly. "I know you must hold resentment, but how could you raise a hand against your sister? She didn't do anything wrong." "Oh, that?" I took my phone from my pocket and held it up, giving it a light shake right in front of Chloe. "Chloe Sterling, don't you want to see what I recorded?" Under everyone's gaze, Chloe stared at the phone, her face turning instantly pale. The truth was, I hadn't recorded anything. With how confident she was, I already guessed the garden security cameras had been disabled long ago. But she was too stupid. Everything she thought showed right on her face. All it took was a little bait for her to panic. Now this was getting interesting. Even if Mrs. Sterling wanted to sweep things under the rug, it wouldn't be so easy anymore. Not with witnesses present. And that witness happened to be Arthur's close friend. I genuinely wanted to see how quiet, stoic Arthur would handle the fake sister he had cherished all these years. Chloe's face was ghostly white. Her hands trembled as she tried to push herself up, her voice almost cracking. You couldn't have recorded anything." I rarely smiled kindly at her, but this time I did. A clear, almost gentle smile. "Afraid your mother will see the video? Don't worry, she adores you. Even if you lied, I'm sure she wouldn't mind, right?" Hearing that, Mrs. Sterling turned, suspicion flickering in her eyes. "Chloe, exactly what happened?" Her expression stiffened, her lips quivered as panic filled her gaze. With her birth mother now doubting her, her voice cracked as she said she wasn't sure. Maybe she misremembered. Maybe she saw wrong. I was done listening. I turned to Arthur, whistling casually. "Young Master Sterling, what do you think?" Arthur glanced at me, face expressionless, then picked up the documents and headed for the door. "Whatever's going on between you all has nothing to do with me." I wasn't surprised, only shrugged in response. Liam followed behind him, giving me a playful wink. "Looks like Mr. Sterling won't be home again tonight. He's always busy. There's always something at the company he can't finish."
That evening, because of the commotion earlier, I didn't go down for dinner. The meal was brought up to my room instead. Coincidentally, the person delivering it happened to be the head housekeeper, the same woman who had mocked me the first day I returned. I remembered her face clearly. I didn't let her step inside. Standing in the doorway, arms crossed, my gaze landed on the neatly arranged meal tray as I asked, my tone light but with a hint of mockery, "Did you make sure not to put anything unclean in there?" The housekeeper forced a smile, her voice barely above a whisper. "Of course not, Miss Sarah. I misspoke that day. Please don't take it to heart." Miss Sarah. How amusing that sounded. I stepped forward slightly, still not taking the tray, letting my eyes linger on her sweat-dampened face. Truly didn't add anything, hmm? Her expression worsened by the second. She lowered her head, voice trembling. Miss Sarah, I'm truly sorry. When you first returned, I didn't know your identity. I only heard that Miss Chloe's heart condition had flared up, so I panicked and said things without thinking. Mm-hmm, I responded lightly, neither forgiving nor condemning. How long have you worked here? She stiffened, glanced up at me, then suddenly, thud. She dropped to her knees right at the threshold. Miss Sarah, if you're angry, hit me if you must. Just please don't fire me. I rely on this job to survive. If I hadn't caught that fleeting spark of resentment in her eyes right before she knelt, maybe I would have believed she was truly afraid. Unfortunately for her, I'd lived in shelters far too long. I'd met plenty of people who smiled on the surface while hiding knives behind their backs. Apologies, tears, fear, they were all just tools, nothing more. I was about to speak when Mrs. Sterling's voice echoed down the hallway. You can go. I want to speak with Sarah alone. Leaning casually against the door frame, I watched the housekeeper fumble to pick up the tray and hurry away. Mrs. Sterling rubbed her forehead, looking exhausted. Let's talk inside. I nodded and stepped aside to let her in. She glanced around before asking, Is the room comfortable? I answered calmly. It's fine. Better than sleeping under a bridge in Manhattan, at least. Her brows twitched. She opened her mouth as if to say something, then swallowed the words. After a moment, she sighed softly. About what happened today, could you not hold it against Chloe? I nodded, without hesitation. Of course. She exhaled in relief, but before she could finish, I added slowly, clearly. Just make sure that if something like this happens again, whether it's my fault or not, you remind dear Chloe not to hold it against me either. Mrs. Sterling's face twisted like she'd bitten into a lemon. But now she had grown somewhat accustomed to my way of speaking, half honest, half mocking, impossible to read. Sarah, she began, I know you've suffered all these years outside. I want to make it up to you. But Chloe and I have lived together for so long. Our bond runs deep. She's fragile. I can't send her away. As you said, the Sterlings aren't lacking in money. Supporting 2 daughters isn't difficult. I can give you both the best. Her gaze was earnest. Too bad I couldn't stomach sentimental family affection. I replied flatly. You know, the one who should have been called Chloe was actually me. Like I said, I never intended to do anything to her. It's just that she insisted on scheming in front of me, so I merely helped her along. People are biased by nature. You care more for Chloe. I understand. But this kind of favoritism, it's no different than saying outright that in your heart, I'm just some unknown child with blood that doesn't belong to the Sterling family. If you want both daughters, the least you can do is treat us fairly. Isn't that the most basic principle? Mrs. Sterling froze, then finally massaged her temples with a sigh. What happened today won't ever happen again. I tilted my head. You mean Chloe won't pull any more dirty tricks, or... Her lips twitched. I mean, I'll treat you both fairly from now on. I gave a short, mirthless laugh. She couldn't even bring herself to say one half-hearted word of comfort. Mrs. Sterling hesitated, then added, But there's something I need to make clear. I no longer expected much, so I replied casually, Go on? She said, Chloe doesn't wish to see her birth mother, so what you mentioned before, let's drop it. My expression shifted instantly. A cold smile tugged at my lips, never reaching my eyes. doesn't wish to see her. What is that supposed to mean? I don't understand." Before she could speak, I cut her off. At the end of the day, the one her birth mother hurt was me. She was just an infant when the switch happened. No one blames her. So what exactly is she bothered by? Has anyone blamed her for anything? Or is it that I don't deserve a single fair explanation, a single apology from the person who ruined my life? My voice rose despite myself. Anger, sharp and ugly, slipped through. Mrs. Sterling stiffened, finally sensing just how deeply I hated that woman. She didn't dare say anything that might ignite the anger further. But even her silence couldn't calm me. I thought the disappointment she had given me today had already hit the limit. Turns out her bias ran deeper than I imagined. Even seeing me furious, she couldn't muster one comforting word. The cold indifference washed over me like ice water. I took a deep breath. I need a reason. Seeing me calmer, she softened her tone. Chloe is kind-hearted. She doesn't want you dwelling on the past. And if her birth mother shows up, this house will fall into chaos. Then don't say any more. I interrupted her again. Ask your conscience whether that excuse is worth anything. I opened the door. A breeze from the hallway drifted in, carrying the faint scent of jasmine, sharp and cold. If there's nothing else, I want to rest. Mrs. Sterling clearly didn't expect me to cut her off so decisively. Her face darkened. Don't forget where you are. My expression didn't so much as flicker. Oh, I remember. This is the Sterling household, not the home of Serafina Chen. Do you want me to pack my things and leave? Her jaw tightened. She was suppressing anger, but when she met my steady, unafraid eyes, she swallowed it down. Think it over. I'll leave first. At the doorway, she added, You haven't eaten anything? I'll have someone bring more food later. I made no reply. My gaze had already drifted to the framed family photo on Chloe's desk. A perfect picture, with no place for me. I slid to the floor, leaning against the bed, absent-mindedly playing with my old, scratched phone. The signal was weak, but strong enough to send one message to my best friend. How's the investigation going? Yes, I had never put full trust in the Sterlings. From the first moment I saw their calm, too calm faces, devoid of warmth, I knew this place could never be home. I would find the person, the one who switched me at birth and tossed me aside like something worthless. My friend replied quickly. She said she needed more time to filter through the list of everyone who might have been involved in the switch 20 years ago. Once the list was complete, she would investigate them one by one. I knew some things couldn't be rushed. Digging up a past buried for 20 years required patience. I set the phone down and stretched out to rest. The second night in the Sterling mansion was so quiet I could hear the ticking of the clock. Just as sleep was about to claim me, a soft knock echoed at the door. A maid's voice called from outside. Miss Sarah, young Master Arthur asked me to tell you he'd like to see you in his study. I paused. Thinking of that cold-faced older brother, expressionless from morning till night, I hesitated for a few seconds, then got up. I wanted to see whether that man truly felt nothing or simply didn't consider me worth acknowledging.
Arthur Sterling's study sat at the far end of the second-floor hallway. The dark wooden door was slightly ajar, a dim glow spilling into the hall. When I pushed it open and stepped inside, I realized the room was even larger than Chloe's. He was the future heir, after all. No wonder the entire family pinned so many expectations on him. I didn't bother with politeness. My gaze drifted across the room and stopped at the towering wall of books. Arthur looked up, gave a small jerk of his chin, signaling me to sit in the leather chair opposite him. I obeyed. He got straight to the point.
Is there anything here you find uncomfortable? I lifted an eyebrow. Odd. He was the quietest person in the household, yet he was the first to ask me something like that. His brows held their usual severe line, and his cold eyes made me falter for half a second. I cleared my throat and kept my voice even. It's fine. I don't have any extravagant expectations. He nodded. Then what do you plan to do next? I used to have the tiniest sliver of hope. Now I had only one goal left: drag the person who switched me into the light and make them pay. But facing Arthur, so still, so unreadable, I decided to probe sideways. I told him my immediate plan: to drive Chloe Sterling out of the Sterling household. A flicker crossed his eyes. I kept my expression blank. Arthur tilted his head slightly, then nodded slowly. Ambitious. I blinked, not sure what he meant, when he continued. Kicking her out isn't impossible. The real question is whether you're capable. If you want the scales in your mother's heart to tip towards you, you need to show her you're the better choice. Silence settled over the study. Arthur's gaze locked onto mine. Being good with words is useless. I looked at him, his immaculate clothes, his rigid posture, the way he spoke like he was reading a speech, and a strange thought came to me. He was almost pitiful. So this was how he'd been raised since childhood: an upgraded, colder, more rational, heir apparent model. Of course, I had no right to pity him. Under the so-called rules of the strong, things like affection and kindness were privileges reserved for those raised in comfort. I suddenly asked, "And if I manage it?" Arthur replied, his tone calm to the point of emptiness, "Then I'll welcome you as a new member of this family." I nearly snapped. Who needs you welcome? But forced myself to swallow it back down. At least his words confirmed one thing. Until everything was settled, Arthur Sterling had no intention of interfering in the war between me, Mrs. Sterling, and Chloe.
The transfer paperwork was processed faster than I expected. By the end of the weekend, Chloe and I were already required to attend a prestigious private school in Manhattan, the one where everyone knew the Sterling family had 2 young ladies. That morning, just as I stepped out the front door, Ethan Davies was already waiting outside, leaning against his brand new BMW as he came to pick up Chloe. The two of them stood beneath the trees, talking softly, exchanging looks full of unspoken affection. I walked past without bothering to avoid them and deliberately bumped straight into Ethan. The impact was strong enough to make him stumble, nearly losing his balance. "Are you blind?" he shouted, his voice shrill like a barking dog. I shot him a lazy glance. "Who told you to stand in the middle of the walkway?" Ethan's expression darkened. He clearly despised me. Even if that's true, you shouldn't just ram into people. What if the person you hit had been Chloe? I stopped, raised a brow, and replied lightly, "Good point. So tell me, what should I do now?" He froze. Clearly, he hadn't expected a counter-question and stood there speechless like a fool. I didn't bother to look at him again and headed straight for the black sedan parked by the curb. The Sterlings had arranged a private car for me, and I didn't turn it down. As soon as I settled into the back seat, I could still hear Ethan sputtering behind me. "You're the one who bumped into someone. Why are you asking me?" I smirked, without turning my head. Behind us, Chloe stood stiffly, pressed lips tight, before quietly getting into the Davies family car. "Are those two close?" I asked suddenly. The driver flinched so hard he nearly swerved. He hesitated. "I heard young Master Davies and the second miss grew up together." I leaned back against the seat and looked out the window. I didn't need him to say it. I'd already guessed. In the rear view mirror, I caught the driver sneaking a glance at me, his eyes awkward, as if he were looking at someone who didn't belong in this world. He wasn't wrong. Dressed in plain, almost shabby clothes, I looked nothing like the pampered daughter of the Sterling family. All the dresses Mrs. Sterling tried to give me were actually things she'd bought for Chloe last year, cast-offs from a wardrobe too full to hold more. I had taken all of them and hung them back in Chloe's room. When I came downstairs, I was still wearing my old t-shirt and jeans. Mrs. Sterling just sighed and said, "This afternoon, I'll take you to buy some new clothes." I had wanted to refuse, but remembering Arthur's words from the day before, I swallowed the retort. I was placed in the class right next to Chloe's. Somehow her classmates had heard rumors that she had nearly had a panic attack over the weekend and arrived at school looking deathly pale. They swarmed around her, asking all sorts of questions. I figured that ghostly pale look came from catching sight of me that morning, sitting by the window, reading calmly. If I hadn't felt much hostility toward her before, then ever since she told Mrs. Sterling she didn't want to see her birth mother, my patience had evaporated. Usually people only block something when there's something terrifying to hide. So what was she hiding? Perhaps I'd need to spend some time digging. I was flipping through my book to pass the time when a tapping sound hit the window. I looked up. Who else would it be but Ethan Davies, the same boy who had made his dislike loud and clear that morning? I raised an eyebrow. "What do you want?" He scowled. "Come out for a minute. I need to talk to you." He'd barely stood outside for a few seconds, yet the whole class was already whispering. No one had cared much about the transfer student earlier, but now, the moment Ethan showed up, every pair of eyes in the room turned towards me. I hated being stared at, so I stood up and walked out without hesitation. "What is it? Say it." He kept a cold expression. "Follow me." Watching him walk with one hand in his pocket, chin raised, trying so hard to look like the male lead of a teen drama, was almost funny. He must have come running because Chloe had said something to him in the car. Still just a 17 or 18-year-old boy, everything showed clearly on his face. Ethan led me around the school courtyard several times, always keeping a certain distance. When I walked faster, he sped up. When I slowed down, he slowed down. Finally, he stopped in front of the equipment storage room and motioned for me to go inside. I arched a brow and let out a short laugh. "What is this? Planning to lock me up? That's a pretty cheap trick." Ethan's annoyance flared as he stepped inside first. "Can't you stop in so we can talk?" I shrugged, still wearing that half-amused smile, and slowly followed him in. I had a rough idea of what Ethan Davies wanted to say. Nothing new under the sun. Don't bully Chloe. Know your place, whether at the Sterling house or school, yada yada. Young men always side with the girl they like. How much more original could the script be? So I stepped into the room, closed the door on my own, leaned against the wall, chin slightly raised, ready to watch him perform. Ethan frowned, voice low and tense. "What did you do to Chloe?" I tilted my head, feigning surprise. "What do you mean?" "Don't play dumb. I didn't go to the Sterlings yesterday, but this morning I saw her crying non-stop. If it wasn't you, then who?" I studied the brows in those so-called handsome, cold eyes, thinking he was utterly clueless. I answered lazily, my tone light as if I were half asleep. "Didn't you ask her?" He immediately fell into the trap. "I asked, but the more I asked, the harder she cried. She couldn't even speak. If it wasn't you, then who?" I feigned understanding, nodding slowly. "Oh, I get it now. Maybe she's embarrassed about yesterday? Go tell her yourself, I won't mind." My roundabout words made Ethan snap. He stepped forward, his shadow stretching across the cement floor, voice sharp. "Say it clearly." He lunged at me, and I leaned in, meeting him halfway. The space between us shrunk to a single breath. He froze, taking a step back. What are you doing? I tilted my head, a faint smile playing on my lips, the dimple barely visible, innocent, teasing. Weren't you going to ask me something? Why back away then? He pointed at me, ears flaming. Don't just stand there and talk. And why should I listen to you? I said lightly. He cleared his throat twice, trying to regain control. Fine, just don't move. I shrugged, tone like a breeze. Okay, fine. Now cautious, he advanced, each step tentative, as if approaching a ticking bomb. He was so fixated on my movements, he didn't notice what was happening around us. Then, when the timing was perfect, I suddenly grabbed the collar of his shirt and yanked him toward me. Everything happened in an instant. He couldn't react, lost his balance, and fell forward onto me. So close I could see each trembling eyelash. I looked into his wide-open eyes, lips curling slightly, a fleeting smile like a butterfly brushing past. I tilted my head to the side, waiting for the perfect moment. The door swung open. Leading the charge was Chloe Sterling, followed by a group of girls, all frozen, eyes wide at the scene before them. Ethan's fallen posture left no other explanation in their eyes but one word: intimate. I heard a sharp intake of breath, then the first scream. Chloe's tears immediately spilled over. The girls behind her started panicking, shouting like they'd witnessed a crime. I knew it! She's seducing Ethan Davies! Shameless! Right here in the equipment room! How disgusting! I stayed put, calm, eyes on the ceiling, while the room descended into chaos. In a way, I had to genuinely thank Ethan. Without him, I would have missed such a perfectly staged scene. Ethan's face burned red from cheeks to neck. Even while his childhood friend at the door cried, he couldn't look. He clenched his teeth and barked, "Get up!" I didn't hurry, even winked at him teasingly, voice airy, "Aren't you going to help me up?" Serafina Chen, I know my limits. I pushed myself off him, dusted off my shirt, and glanced at the crowd pressed against the doorway. Well, I said, smirking faintly, quite the turnout. Chloe's eyes shimmered with tears, voice trembling as if she might break apart. Why are you doing this to me? I tilted my head, feigning innocence. Doing what? Your childhood friend called me here. Many people saw. The words barely left my mouth when Chloe's gaze shifted to Ethan Davies, teary, confused, and tinged with resentment. Ethan, She didn't finish. Her whole body swayed, one hand clutching her chest, her breathing ragged as if she couldn't get air. Chloe! Ethan rushed forward, catching her collapsing form, voice nearly breaking. Call an ambulance! I watched the scene silently. Ethan's eyes blazed with fury towards me, but I calmly lifted my face, tears welling, yet expressionless, as still as a midnight lake, without a single ripple.
Death? That's out of the question. But making Mrs. Sterling fly into a rage and hover anxiously by Chloe's bedside? That was entirely possible. Even Arthur had temporarily set aside his work. The housekeeper brought a steaming bowl of nourishing soup. I leaned against the doorway, arms crossed, watching them swarm around Chloe like actors in some old, overdone play, both tedious and absurd. Liam Johnson, Arthur's friend, nudged me lightly. Hey, you didn't do this, did you? I raised an eyebrow, amused. Why would you think that? He shrugged, overreacting a bit. A little incident, and she's like about to be hospitalized. I've never heard Arthur's sister was this fragile. And now, all of a sudden, the minute you arrive, she's practically dying? I chuckled. Noticing Arthur's indifferent gaze, Liam grinned like a good little puppy. Okay, I'll give credit where it's due. Before I could reply, Mrs. Sterling finally had a free hand and spun toward me, voice sharp, eyes like knives. Serafina Chen, come here. I glanced at Liam and stepped forward. Yes, Mrs. Sterling.
Her grip tightened, face pale. "On your knees." I said, "Kneel. I've protected you for all those years you were wandering outside, enduring so much, and yet what have you done? Cruel, trying to harm your own sister?" I paused a few seconds, then smiled. The smile made her hesitate. I didn't bother countering her feigned concern, just stepped closer, closing the space between us. "So, how about this? We make a little trade." Mrs. Sterling, intimidated by my aura, took a couple of cautious steps back, eyes wary. "What are you talking about?" I glanced at Chloe, lying on the bed, tears glistening like a lead actress at the climax of a drama, then said sarcastically, "I'll donate my heart to her." Immediately, all eyes in the room turned toward me. Ethan Davies stood across, eyes unreadable, conflicted. In the silence, I could hear someone inhale sharply. I smiled lightly, a breeze gliding over a still lake. "But my condition is this: put the person who swapped the children 20 years ago behind bars." Time seemed to freeze. Mrs. Sterling's lips quivered, voice choked. You really want to donate your heart to Chloe? But if that's the case..." I remained calm, each word light but heavy in impact. "I can die. After all, the Sterlings are powerful. You can do whatever you want." "No!" No one expected Chloe to be the first to object. Tears welled in her eyes, voice trembling almost to a shout. I can't accept your heart. It's harming someone. I'd never live with a clear conscience." I arched an eyebrow, tone slow, deliberate. What if I asked for nothing in return, simply wanted to give her my heart? Chloe froze, lips quivering, unable to utter a word. I smiled slightly, coldly, tilting my head. "So, you're afraid I'll put your birth mother in jail, huh?" Chloe bit her lips, tears spilling, voice shaking. "After all, she's my mother. I can't..." I turned to Mrs. Sterling, eyes icy, calm as ever. "And you, how do you feel about this?" Mrs. Sterling hadn't fully recovered, face pale, lips quivering. After a long pause, she muttered to herself, You really have to find the person from back then?" I looked straight at her, emphasizing every word, unflinching. "Do you mean that a life like mine isn't worth the price of justice?" No one answered. The room fell silent, broken only by the heavy breathing of each person and Mrs. Sterling's vacant, uneasy, slightly fearful gaze. As I turned to leave the hospital room, only Liam followed me. His steps were hurried, voice tinged with unease. "Even if you really agree to this, they couldn't actually do it, could they?" I neither confirmed nor denied. I just smiled faintly, my tone calm, chillingly composed. "Who knows? They wouldn't dare touch me openly, but what if I had an accident?" I paused, tilting my head toward him, eyes curved lightly, but without a trace of amusement. An accident, one that could be life-threatening. The corridor lights reflected in my eyes, sharp as a blade. I asked him, "Liam, would you risk your life to bet on human nature?" He froze, eyes flickering, then answered slowly, voice roughened. "So you're saying you're betting your own life?" I studied him for a few seconds, then laughed. The sound echoed in the empty hallway, soft yet biting. "Who knows? But even if I am, who would care?" Liam stared at me, trying to grasp something intangible. "Can you tell me what you actually want to do?" I shrugged, nonchalant. What if you ran back and reported to Arthur? Why would I tell you? His expression softened, eyes dropped, like a loyal dog ignored by its master. His voice fell to a quiet, slow murmur. I have no reason to help him. I smiled, the kind of faint smile that carried almost no warmth. But you also have no reason to help me. Liam gazed at me for a long moment, eyes deep and still like water. Then he whispered, almost inaudibly, as if only I could hear. You are different. I didn't know which sentence I said in that hospital room had struck a nerve in Chloe, only that she dragged her fragile little body out of the ward and immediately went home to recover. Mr. Sterling, no matter how busy, rushed back to visit her, but compared to Chloe's health, he seemed far more concerned about whether she could still be used for a future political marriage. Madame Sterling, on the other hand, never left her side. Tender, attentive, devoted. The servants took turns cooking soups and herbal tonics 3 times a day, working tirelessly to pamper their princess. Even her childhood sweetheart Ethan came by to check on her, then promptly blocked my path at the top of the stairs, eyes red-shot, face burning with fury. You did that on purpose, didn't you? That day, you deliberately triggered Chloe's condition so she had to be hospitalized, didn't you? I laughed. So what? You think I'm a walking bad omen? She's been perfectly healthy for over 10 years, yet the moment I return, she suddenly becomes weak and delicate? Tisk tisk. Even illnesses know how to pick their timing. Ethan's jaw tightened. It's because you kept provoking her. Well then, I shrugged. To make it up to her, I've decided to give her my heart. That way she'll never fall sick again. A direct hit. His rage was instantly drowned as if I had poured a bucket of ice water over him. His expression wavered, turning indescribably conflicted. You're insane, he muttered. Not insane. I stepped closer, then let my hand fall away. Have you never considered it? That maybe dying would be the cleanest escape for me? No more parents who never once regarded me as their child. No more living with a ticking bomb time as a gentle, pitiful younger sister. Ethan instinctively backed away, but I had already cornered him against the wall. I give her my heart, I said, soft but sharp as a blade. She gets healthy. She might even marry you someday. The whole family is peaceful, no conflict, no chaos. A neat little ending everyone can be satisfied with. Isn't that right, Ethan Davies? My voice slipped in like a devil whispering through the dark. Isn't that what you want too? No! Sweat broke out along his forehead. No, this mustn't. I tilted my head, expression shamelessly innocent. Why not? Isn't this exactly what all of you want? Ethan had no answer. He bolted like he had seen a ghost. Idiot. A few sentences and he's completely fooled. I felt wonderfully refreshed, humming a tune as I walked away. My best friend finally sent the full list. Every doctor and nurse who had been on duty during the delivery back then, as well as all the mothers who had given birth during that same time period. Not a single name missing. She said it took her a long time to dig that deep, but at least she made it in time. I stared at the thick stack of documents in my hand, unsure what I was feeling. I never dared gamble my life on human decency. To Madame Sterling, I was nothing but an eyesore, and Chloe, the girl who had called her mom for over a decade, obviously occupied a softer place in her heart. I flipped through each page carefully, each line of text, each attached photograph. Moonlight spilled through the window, coating the papers in a thin, frozen layer of silver. I closed my eyes. In my mind, step by step, I began arranging my plan all over again. There was nowhere to retreat now. If I wanted to survive, I had to strike first. When Chloe Sterling received the anonymous text message, I was sitting in on her piano lesson. A complete outsider like me understood nothing about the strange symbols on her sheet music, but perhaps because I was there, she played with unusual enthusiasm. She chatted with the instructor using a barrage of technical terms, and every so often, she glanced at me, eyes glittering with thinly veiled pride. That confidence evaporated in an instant. Her phone lit up. I remained in my seat, chin resting on my hand. The distance wasn't close, but close enough to see her face drain of color, her fingers tremble, a cold sheen of sweat rising across her forehead. That expression wasn't surprise. It was pure, bone-deep fear. Even the piano instructor noticed something was wrong and asked gently, "Chloe, are you all right?" She forced a smile, her voice trembling. I'm not feeling very well." But even as she said it, her gaze flicked toward me again. I simply looked back, calm, unblinking. It was that silence that made her panic even more. Within 10 seconds, Chloe had turned away and asked to step outside to rest. The instructor, well aware of her supposedly fragile health, didn't question it. But the moment Chloe left the room, the teacher fell completely silent. She didn't attempt any conversation with me at all. I wasn't surprised. The Sterling family had never publicly acknowledged my existence. To the outside world, the Sterling household had only one daughter, Chloe Sterling. And I was no one. Not that I cared, because at that exact moment, my own phone buzzed. A new message lit up the screen. A reply from Chloe Sterling. "Miss Sterling, I know your secret. I know who your real mother is. Chloe Sterling. Who are you? What do you want? How much are you willing to pay to keep this quiet? Tell me how much." I thought for a moment, then gave her a number, large enough to feel real, small enough not to be suspicious. $5 million. With the Sterling family's wealth, that amount barely caused a ripple. If my information was right, her monthly allowance alone could cover it. At first, Chloe hesitated. She wasn't fully convinced. Until I sent the photo. A photo only someone directly involved could ever possess. Her expression shifted instantly. Not 10 minutes later, she texted me again. Her tone completely changed. "How do you want to make the transaction?" I chose the safest way. Split the payment. Half in cash, the other half transferred into an anonymous account Liam Johnson helped me open under a hidden identity. A setup impossible to trace. While Chloe Sterling was busy scrambling for money and had no time to keep an eye on me, I began to shift my focus. I softened every edge I had and deliberately drew closer to Mrs. Sterling. I knew exactly the type of person she adored. Gentle, sensible, attentive, and just intelligent enough to inspire trust without posing any threat. Acting like that? For me, it was as easy as breathing. I borrowed Arthur's calmness, added a touch of Chloe's softness, then layered in just enough quiet intelligence to make Mrs. Sterling pleasantly surprised, maybe even moved. Within only a few short days, I had planted one very clear thought in her mind. Blood will always recognize blood. Everything I did well became her genes. Compared to Chloe, the fragile, sickly girl who only knew how to look pitiful, I, carefully refined and polished, resembled the true daughter of the Sterling family far more than she ever could. And Chloe, too busy gathering money, didn't notice that I was slipping into the empty space in her mother's heart. The day I deliberately created an effect, right when Chloe texted me that only the cash portion of the payment remained, Ethan Davies came to visit her. They were sitting together in the living room when Mrs. Sterling and I returned from shopping. The driver followed behind us with several large shopping bags. I was smiling brightly, my hand linked naturally through Mrs. Sterling's arm as if we had been close for years. The moment Chloe saw us, she froze. Her eyes immediately turned red for some unknown reason, and tears started streaming down her face so abruptly that even Ethan beside her was taken aback. She followed her line of sight. The instant his eyes landed on me, his brows pulled together in a mix of confusion and irritation. Realizing she had exposed too much, Chloe hurriedly covered her face, sobbing as she ran upstairs. Mrs. Sterling looked displeased, but habits formed over years are hard to break. She moved to chase after her daughter, but when she turned and saw my hand still linked through her arm, she faltered. I offered a gentle smile. "Don't worry about me, Mom. You should go. I don't want her to misunderstand." I let go of her arm. She didn't hear the faint mockery hidden in my words. She simply rushed after Chloe, clearly distressed. I casually instructed the driver to put the bags away and prepared to return to my room, but Ethan Davies stopped me. "Can't you stop doing this to her?" My expression didn't shift. With my back still to him, I replied coolly, "If you can cut ties with your own biological parents, then yes, I can stop doing this." And with that, I walked away without looking back. Trying to restrain me with morality? Sorry, I don't have that kind of morality. I used every trick Chloe had once used. On her. She faked fragility, so I learned softness. In front of others, I became patient, quiet, agreeable. Behind their backs, I presented myself as even more pitiful, even more helpless. A child lost for nearly 20 years, finally reunited with her real family, yet forced to endure the existence of the girl who took her place, bearing it all without complaint. I perfected the role so completely that whenever Mrs. Sterling happened to pass by, she would catch me sitting quietly in the dark, eyes faintly red, like someone trying hard not to cry just so her mother wouldn't worry. With guilt festering in her heart, she naturally wanted to make up to me, and I made sure Chloe learned of each of those moments. Unable to think of anything new, she repeated her old tactics, pretending to be sick. Unfortunately for her, those tricks only worked when she was the family's sole focus. Now that I was here, every time she used her health to act spoiled, it only made Mrs. Sterling tired and annoyed. Throughout that entire period, I didn't say a single unnecessary word to Chloe. But I knew very well that the little mental snare I had set was tightening around her bit by bit. And yet all of that still wasn't my final goal. It was only the appetizer. That morning, when I came downstairs for breakfast, the very day I was supposed to meet Chloe for our transaction, I happened to catch a glimpse of one of the maids hunched over the stove in the kitchen. The air was thick with the heavy, almost cloying scent of simmering ginseng broth. The moment she saw me, she stiffened, eyes tightening with wary alertness, as if terrified I might demand a taste of the precious tonic she had prepared. I didn't say a word. I simply stood at the doorway, smiling faintly. I didn't need to ask who it was for. In this house, most of the staff had served for years. Their loyalty to Chloe was unquestionable. With a soft smile, I ordered her to take care of another chore. Even if she was unwilling, she had no choice. If I mentioned this to Mrs. Sterling, her job would be hanging by a thread. That day, I told Chloe to bring the money to an abandoned storage warehouse in Brooklyn, one without a single functioning camera. She showed up with an overstuffed handbag, completely defenseless. Tying her up was almost disappointingly easy. Chloe was painfully naive. She hadn't spotted a single crack in the plan I had so carefully crafted, not until I stood in front of her, no longer pretending. For a moment, she looked like her mind had frozen, then shattered into a frenzy of curses. Her voice sharpened into something warped and feral, with none of the delicate, frail little lady act she usually paraded around. I wasn't angry. I didn't have the time or patience for her hysterical ranting anyway, so I cut her off. I'm not planning to hurt you, but if you want to leave here safely, you'll have to pay a price. You already took my money, she screamed, tears blurring with rage. I smiled coldly. And who pays for my grudge? Who compensates that? She writhed against the ropes, as if being exposed made her skin burn. What grudge? What did I ever do to you? Why did you kidnap me? Serafina Chen, are you insane? I replied calmly. You have two choices for the person who comes to retrieve you today. 1, your biological mother. 2, Mrs. Sterling. Choose. Panic flickered violently in her eyes. What are you trying to do? I tilted my head, speaking softly, almost sweetly. When you left the house this morning, did you run into your real mother? Oh, let me clarify. I'm not talking about Mrs. Sterling. I mean the woman who's been pretending to be a maid these past few days. The one who wakes up every morning to simmer broth for you. She's your biological mother, isn't she? I crouched down, smiling with a cruelty so gentle it was almost tender. The two of you are actually very alike. Pick one. I can't guess which side of you weighs heavier. Chloe glared at me so hard, she looked like ready to pop a vein. What did you do to my mother? Her voice cracked. I shrugged, like I was mentioning what I had for breakfast. Nothing dramatic. I treated her exactly like I treated you. She's tied up too. You know, I despise her, down to the bone. She's the reason for every year I spent suffering in the group home. And Mrs. Sterling? I chuckled. Because of a few soft little words from you, she was ready to forgive your mother completely. You think I'd let that slide? I held up the phone I had taken from Chloe and wiggled it lightly. If you're worried I'm lying, I can call your mother right now and see if she picks up. Chloe inhaled sharply, her usual weak, pitiful facade disintegrating into something contorted and raw, her mask ripped off entirely. What do you want me to choose? She whispered hoarsely. I smiled, a soft, lulling whisper. 2 people. I'll only take revenge on one. If you choose your real mother, then bring Mrs. Sterling here. I'll release both you and the maid. If you choose Mrs. Sterling, I let the words drag out. You will never see your biological mother again. As for Mrs. Sterling, I tilted my head, voice taunting. You've noticed it, haven't you? She's been very close to me lately and growing more tired of you by the day. Becoming the unwanted child of the Sterling family, it's only a matter of time. After all, you're not their real daughter, are you? Chloe's face grew paler, twisting tighter with every word I dropped. I continued gently, coaxingly, like luring a child. Just bring Mrs. Sterling here. I swear I'll disappear from the Sterlings' lives with her. Mr. Sterling and your brothers still adore you. Once I step away, you'll be the Sterling heiress again. No competition, no comparisons. And you'll still have your real mother. I looked at her the same way she once looked at me, eyes glistening with false innocence, exactly like the first time she performed her little emotional drama when we met. Now choose. Who matters more in your heart? When news broke that her daughter had been taken, Mrs. Sterling rushed over immediately. That was the moment I had been waiting for. A tiny hidden camera, installed long before, silently captured every frame inside the abandoned warehouse. The second Mrs. Sterling stepped in, her frantic bays darted around the room, and the sight before her made her breath hitch. Chloe Sterling, bound tightly to a chair, mouth taped, letting out weak, muffled sobs. And beside her, on a small monitor, the video I had prepared played on an endless loop. In it, Chloe was choosing, without hesitation, to betray the woman who had cherished her for nearly 20 years. How painfully ironic. Mrs. Sterling swayed on her feet, shock widening her eyes to the point of trembling disbelief. I had left her a message. Chloe's biological mother hadn't been kidnapped at all. I simply sent the woman off on another errand. But she still needed to be punished, I had written. Otherwise, the entire upper circle will laugh at you. Nearly 20 years of raising her only to end up with an ungrateful, disloyal child. Consider this a little gift from me, so you can finally see what kind of person the daughter you treasured more than your own blood truly is. And of course, credit where credit is due, Liam Johnson. His mother adored gossip. When I subtly nudged her to spread the story, she practically begged for extra details, embroidering the tale with such enthusiasm that the scandal spread even faster than I anticipated. As for Mrs. Sterling, someone who lived for reputation, for appearances, how could she endure public humiliation of this magnitude? Once the whispers seeped through every corner of high society, she would pay for it. With disgrace so deep, no amount of wealth or power could ever scrub it clean. A week after I set foot in London, Liam Johnson sent me a message. Chloe Sterling had been expelled from the Sterling household, and along with her, the biological mother who had spent years hiding in plain sight as a housemaid had also been asked to leave. Truthfully, no matter how much resentment I held, I never had enough evidence to drag that woman into court. That was why I had to resort to the crude method of letting them tear each other apart. Now, the two of them squeezed together in a cramped rental room. Old friends, quietly warned by Mrs. Sterling, stopped visiting one by one. Even Ethan Davies. After receiving the video I sent him, he was so shaken he cut ties with Chloe outright. Her biological mother tried finding work, but each attempt was sabotaged behind the scenes by Mrs. Sterling. She was fired again and again. Soon after, rumors began circulating, claims that she was involved in human trafficking. The entire neighborhood whispered behind her back, avoiding her as if she carried a disease. Before I left, I had written a letter to Mrs. Sterling. I detailed everything, every wound, every night of suffocating darkness, every overlooked moment I had endured for years. In it, I wrote, I don't hate you. What I feel is regret. Regret that I no longer have the strength to continue being your daughter. The past has drained me of every last drop of hope and trust. So I choose to let the pain sink to the bottom of the ocean and live as a free child with no father and no mother. My words were gentle, tender, almost forgiving, yet sharp enough to force her to gnaw on her own guilt, to carry the weight of remorse for the rest of her life. 3 months later, I met Liam Johnson again in London. He was traveling and had taken the opportunity to drop by. We sat under the awning of an old cafe. Rain fell steadily, a gray, persistent drizzle. Pedestrians in trench coats stepped carefully through puddles on the cobblestone streets. I always liked rainy days here. They brought a quiet kind of emptiness, a stillness that felt oddly comforting. Liam told me about Chloe's mother. She had fallen gravely ill. The two of them struggled so desperately that they couldn't afford proper medical care. She could only lie on a rickety bed in a damp, cramped room. Chloe had to drop out of school and work herself to exhaustion every day just to buy her mother medicine. But over time, Chloe's resentment grew. She had once tried to plead with Mrs. Sterling, only to be turned away at the gate. She knelt there for more than half an hour, pretending to faint and crying loudly, but no one came. Instead, the guards coldly dragged her up and threw her off the estate. Liam continued. Before I came here, Chloe moved into an even smaller room. It seems she wanted to live alone, indifferent to whether her mother lived or died. The so-called blood ties between mother and daughter had burned down to nothing but cold ashes. I didn't comment. Karma unfolds in its own way. I merely asked casually, "And what about you? What's next for you?" Liam's eyes twinkled with a mixture of jest and weariness. "I like the weather here. Maybe I'll settle down for good. What about you?" I smiled and tapped my cup lightly against his. "Then let's celebrate your new home. Dinner's on me tonight. Deal?" He met my gaze, clinking cups. A faint relief shone in his eyes, mingled with a distant melancholy. "Give and take, huh? Next time, it's on me." The cups rang crisply against each other, a sharp note in the still, windless air. Not every mother has the courage or capacity to love her child completely, and that was fine. I had learned to step out of the darkness on my own, to be my own shield. No need for an old, worn embrace. As long as my heart didn't break, anywhere I stood could be home. Thank you for taking the time to listen to today's story. I truly appreciate all your comments, feedback, and thoughts. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to support the channel. See you in the next stories.